Welcome back, everyone. This is going to be another segment series here on Red Spotlight. I'm your host, Alexis Soto, joined by David Francisco. How are you doing?
I'm good.
This is our recaps where we come back and discuss what happens in the latest Marvel series, which is now on Disney Plus. That is Moon Knight. Last week we discussed the first episode, which I believe was called I forgot what it was called. And then this week's episode is called Summon the Suit. This is the second episode. And usually how we do these things is we talk about how we felt about it initially. And then we get into all the stuff that happens in the episode. And that's usually how it is. So join us here on Red Spotlight number 383. Before we get going, did you hear the story, David, about the Daniels are a team of writer-directors, and they were originally approached by none other than Kevin Feige to helm their multiverse Disney Plus series called Loki, and that they turned that down so that they could work on their own multiverse original property, which they took to A24, which is right now currently playing in theaters. The film is called Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, and currently stars Michelle Yeoh, and is getting quite the bit of buzz. Have you heard of this?
Wait, so they were going to write Loki?
They were the first people that Kevin Feige approached, and they were like, they considered it, and then they turned it down to go do this movie.
Dang.
Isn't that funny?
That's funny.
And you know what makes it even funnier is, again, we're gonna go based off on the reaction to it. It should be. I don't know what it is about it. I think it's kind of like cosmic justice, because at some point, you know, when you're the MCU and you're on top for so long, it's going to come to a point where someone's going to come by and like steal your thunder. We're only about a month away from the opening of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
Mm.
And then this film just opened wide this past week, like just before the Marvel Multiverse film opens, and then they do this. Have you had any interest in seeing this?
Oh yeah, for sure. Right from the beginning.
Are you having any plans to see it? Is it playing around your area?
Yeah, it's actually, I think it's already playing in my theater. But I mean, honestly, any A24 movie I'm always interested in.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm not sure if you and I haven't spoken since Wednesday, so since then I had already seen this twice.
Oh really?
And Peter. And then we also saw it with Kyle just last night. And it is hilarious how this completely just kneecapped Doctor Strange 2.
Dang.
It kneecapped it. Like, there's this Doctor Strange, it doesn't even matter if Doctor Strange manages to be like one of the better MCU films. It doesn't have a prayer to be anywhere near as good as what this was. There'll be a review for it on the regular show sometime in the next week or so. But there's no shortage of praise you can give this movie. There's really no shortage of praise. And they were able to do that on a $25 million budget. Everything, everywhere, all at once. David, I think this may be one of the best movies I've ever seen.
Dang. Okay. That's
and as far as multiverse films, I gotta be honest though, like I feel like it rivals Into the Spider-Verse as far as like, well, first of all, it's a great movie, but second of all, it's just, you're thinking about the multiverse concept. Perhaps this one did it a tad bit better. This may be the definitive multiverse film, and you know what's an added bit of extra salt here? Maybe not even salt, but maybe just a little bit of extra sauce, you want to say, that makes this a little bit sweeter. Everything Everywhere All at Once hilariously enough, again, this is something that's pretty much like taking all the whatever excitement any of us had for Doctor Strange and like throwing it out the window. Everything Everywhere All at Once happens to be produced by Joe and Anthony Russo. Oh my god, this is so wonderful. So I don't like hyping people up on movies because I always feel so disappointed when people don't feel the same way. I don't want to ruin anybody's experience, but wow. So that's that movie, and if you can catch it in a theater, and you know what I will say about it is, I thankfully was able to experience the movie with some sizable audiences for an A24 film in my community, which I consider to be a good microcosm for the overall general audience of this country. And this is not a film I would have thought would really play well with a lot of people that walked in, and to my surprise, just about everybody that was around us was pretty engaged with it. And it is wild, and it is crazy, and yeah, it's funny. It's funny how this is all like turning out to be. So anyway, that's that. So today we're here discussing all things Marvel, and you know what? We should mention, right before you and I, maybe there is some benefit to you and I, to doing a take two on this, just a little bit of benefit. Something, there was a story that was published just about a few hours ago as of the date of this recording. This comes to us from Screen Rant. And interestingly, this is the 10 best episodes of MCU TV shows according to IMDb. That is the title, okay? So, and I read this piece just to make sure, because I was a little bit thrown by what wasn't included, and I know I shared this with you, David, and you saw it to see what was here. And I had to read the article just to make sure like the Disney Plus shows were like included in this, because it was quite surprising to me. Again, IMDb, by the way, is perhaps one of the truest representations for what an overall audience score would be. I think it's the closest we can come to. Probably, I mean, it's not like perfect or anything, but it gives us an indication about what a general audience feels like, right? And it was surprising how none of the Disney Plus shows managed to have one episode on these. It was basically like two shows that were dominating this, and we'll get to that in a bit. But I had to read the article just to make sure, okay, is this like a list of the Marvel Entertainment shows? Or are the Disney Plus shows included? And it seems, based on what I was reading, they were. But they just didn't make the top 10 as far as the IMDb ratings are concerned.
I mean, I guess it is kind of weird. I feel like WandaVision should be at least one of the episodes. I don't know.
It feels like one episode in particular would be in this list, and we all know which one.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, I think also part of it though too is because you know how people say it's like watching a really long movie, so they're not standalone episodes and everything. That could be another reason. But I mean, either way though, it is surprising that at least one of them should at least be in that list. So
yeah, and it is interesting as well. It's not that common to see many publications treat the entertainment shows as if they were with the Marvel Studios shows, so that's interestingly enough. What did you make of the actual episodes that were included? Well, first of all, the takeaway is it pretty much is all Daredevil and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah, I mean, Daredevil for sure has so many great episodes. But I mean, it seems like a solid list. I didn't really read that much of it. We're fighting.
No, I mean, you just saw the episodes that were there, but it's just hilarious to me how the impression from a lot of the press these days feels as if, like, you know, these shows are not really on the same like level or the same status as the Disney Plus series. And yet you see something like this from IMDb and you think and you realize that, well, that's a completely different story. So, like, we basically have, if I'm not mistaken, 6 Daredevil episodes here. And the ones that I have seen are among the best. Number 10 was New York's Finest. It says here this was Daredevil's showdown with the Punisher. I think the first of them. Penny and Dime, which was pretty much the episode for John Bernthal's performance as Frank Castle. That was the episode where he had that like speech at the end of the episode that left Matt Murdock in tears. That was one of the best ones of Daredevil. Then you also have the episode 7 Minutes in Heaven, where Wilson Fisk and Frank Castle meet in prison. Amazing stuff. The other Daredevil episodes we had here, Blindsided. This one I didn't see. I didn't see season 3. But this is the fourth episode of season 3, where it says here Matt Murdock infiltrates a prison impersonating Foggy. I don't know if that rings a bell. No. That's from season 3. Okay. The Devil You Know, also from season 3, episode 6. Dex has an encounter with Fisk, who tells Dex about how his own father was murdered. That means nothing to me, but maybe. Also, A New Napkin, also from. Wow, it seems Daredevil season 3 is really good. If so many episodes are in here, and I don't know. It seems like no one talks about them as much. But this is the episode where apparently this is the last episode of the show, where Matt Murdock plans to kill Fisk once and for all. So, yeah, there is, interestingly enough, one episode of The Punisher on this list, and that is the penultimate episode of the first season. Is where Frank Castle confess his crimes. Does that ring a bell to you?
Not really.
It says, Home is regarded to be the best episode of the season as Castle's moral struggle is put to the test. Billy Russo emerges as an intriguing villain for the series, and his actions in this episode serve as a persecutor for what's to come later on. I don't remember this, I'm sorry to say, but I think I liked it when I saw it. Fine. So there is that. But yeah, it goes to show you Daredevil is great, and I think it should also serve as a reminder that if Disney Plus, and they really are going to continue the series and, well, again, continue and put that in quotation marks, whatever the fuck that means. But they're going to have another iteration of this character with the same actor in a new series. And if they're really going to have, connection to it or not, it's not going to be good if whatever they think they have, a PG-13 version of this, is not going to come close to what the quality of these episodes were. It's just not going to be a good look. At least that's how I feel. So there is that. And then the last thing I will say about this, again, S.H.I.E.L.D. consider consistently as one of the shows that is so, underrated and left in the dust and never at all mentioned. And yet, hilariously enough, amongst all of the Marvel shows that there have been now, what, did they have 3 episodes in here? In the top 10? And I think we discussed some of these last time. From the first Moon Knight review, we discussed the S.H.I.E.L.D. top 10 by, I think, Sci-Fi it was. And I think there's a lot of commonality here. The 3 episodes were Self-Control. That's when the Life Metal decoys infiltrate S.H.I.E.L.D. What We're Fighting For, which was the series finale. And then, now this is the kicker. Again, this is like IMDb ratings. As I have always been, this is the episode that was directed by Elizabeth Henstridge. By the way, is someone okay? I feel like somebody is dying in the background.
My dad's sick now, and my dog's barking in the backyard. Okay,
I'm sorry. I just feel like somebody is hacking back there, and I'm like, oh, is everything okay? Anyway, as I've always been, directed by Elizabeth Henstridge, who she plays Simmons on the show. This is the only and first time she's directed anything. Well, on this show, she went on to direct an episode of Superman and Lois. But yeah, this is widely considered to be the best episode of that season. Probably one of the best of the series. And you know what, David? And this is pretty surprising. This was the number 1 rated episode of all Marvel shows on IMDb. What do you think about that?
Nah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, what the hell? We'll take it, right? That's right. That's great. Anyway, there is that. As always, I do check for what's trending. The show consistently now is in its 3rd week of trending on Disney Plus. So congratulations to them. That's the only one remaining that's trending right now. Again, that should be worth noting. If we're talking about trending. Also, Moon Knight had some great numbers. Contrary to some who would say, had a big debut. What was it? The numbers. It was the 2nd highest debut for all the Disney Plus shows. It was right behind Loki. Moon Knight had 1.8 million households tune in, according to Samba TB, who's been tracking all of these. So that's pretty cool. And not, I think, something you would expect, considering the popularity of these other characters like Sam and Bucky and Wanda and Vision. So that's pretty cool to see how they're doing and everything. Other stuff that's happened, Clark Gregg turned 60 years old. He does not look 60 years old, but hey, happy birthday. Hopefully we'll see him back as Coulson one day. They also revealed that the Multiverse of Madness movie is going to be really only a little over 2 hours and 6 minutes, if that's, I think, the actual runtime. Considering the fact that we've heard that reshoots were primarily supposed to capture more, what do you call them, cameos. The fact that it's not over 2.5 hours is pretty interesting. Maybe a little bit, fingers crossed, hopeful in our direction, to say the least. And that's kind of where we are right now. The only other thing to mention here is the fact that over the last weekend, there was a lot of conversation, or I wouldn't even say hullabaloo made about the fact that many people thought Daredevil was officially canonized, whatever that even means, by the MCU because of a website. The Marvel website had the entire biography of Matt Murdock from the Netflix series, and it also included his appearance in No Way Home, to which many took to believe that was it. That was the last piece of the puzzle that was needed. That was official confirmation. And a whole bunch of publications ran with that headline. Well, the next day, that paragraph was completely deleted. It was no more. And a whole bunch of people had to be forced to retract the previous headlines because it ended up not being the case. First, to me, it's just pretty hilarious how a lot of people just fell for it like this. Second of all, it's kind of sad too, because why would you take the word of a website over the actual person who you consider to be it's inconsistent, right? Because some people out there would say that Kevin Feige says this, and this about another show, and that's why it's not important. But then he says nothing, but then a website says what they want to hear, and they take that as official word. Obviously, it's not going to be that way. So, I don't know. David, it seems like they're going to keep this as vague as possible. And they don't seem interested in clarifying anything. It's weird because it's this happened at the same time that a lot of those stars were asked back to do a promotional advertisement for Disney Plus, when they debuted on the service earlier last month. I mean, I don't know. At the same time, a lot of these stars are being asked to come back, in No Way Home and in Hawkeye. So it's and now they're on Disney Plus now. So it's this question overall of canon. I don't know. It doesn't seem as if they're interested in ever answering that. What do you think?
I mean, I think they're just trying to keep their options open. But I mean, I think we said a bunch of times, it's kind of dumb to keep it open like that. Just confirm it. People want them back. So it's all kind of ridiculous. But then also, it's kind of tiring, just this obsession of whether or not they are in the MCU or not. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I mean, I think we should just get a confirmation by now. Even if like they retract it later, like I really wouldn't care. You know, if they say like, yeah, Matt Murdock's in the MCU, it's like cool. Then like a year later, it's like we're we're recasting. It's like, okay, fine, I guess that's fine too. Like as long as I get the Daredevil.
Yeah. Who knows, man? Honestly, who knows? But you know, between all it's just nice to see a lot of these old shows get their due, you know, in one way or the other with these headlines. So very happy to see that. Anyway, let's just go ahead and get to it, right? So Moon Knight episode 2. You know, it's genuinely interesting. This is not a show I was excited about. This was not a show that I would say I'm loving either, but I'm really enjoying and I'm really liking in a way that I kind of wasn't expecting. And at this point, I'm pretty ready to say that it's different enough from the other shows in that it doesn't feel overtly MCU. With the exception, of course, of some of the humor and the comedy, very much does feel as if like Kevin Feige brought in his like team of writers to like pump up some of the jokes. Mm-hmm. That's for sure. But while that's definitely one of the glaring exceptions, the rest of it feels unlike a lot of the other Disney Plus series in that it doesn't feel entirely Marvel 100% of the time. I'm really appreciating the supernatural aspect of it. A lot of the performances are pretty great. Ethan Hawke continues to be pretty incredible, especially in this episode. I love the look of the suits that we get here. I think for what little action there is, and to be clear, I have no issue with how little action there is thus far. I'm liking it thus far. I don't think the VFX are anything to write home about, but I don't think they're downright terrible either. In this episode, I mean episode 2. Yeah, I think to me, like with episode 2, it's just a continuation, and I feel like I'm much more in, or I should say I'm much more invested in what's going on now, and I'm much more sold about the story and these characters with this episode. I thought it was a great continuation, and I really do, with just these 2 episodes, enjoy and like Stephen Grant as a character. Mm-hmm. And I'm just fascinated by literally all of what's happening. And Oscar Isaac's performance is captivating enough to keep my attention. I would say it's one of the better performances in all of the MCU. Easily. This is the performance Oscar is giving through Stephen Grant is unlike anything I think we've seen him do. It's the right level of quirk. This episode also featured, you know, other aspects to it. I'm enjoying the direction. I'm enjoying the editing choices here. Even some of the cinematography or the shots that they capture. It's like, thus far, I'm getting the impression that these people, thankfully, were given the space to like separate themselves enough from the larger universe where they didn't feel the need to like connect themselves or attach themselves so overtly the way that others did. And I'm appreciating that. I don't know thus far why they kept saying that this was the most violent show that they've done so far. Again, 2 episodes in, maybe we'll see that happen in the coming weeks. But so far, I'm not really seeing why they were selling the show as that they're most violent yet. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, David. I thought this was a pretty strong episode. I kind of like this even more than the pilot, if I'm being honest with you. The more I think about it. And I'm really hopeful at the end of this show, I'm able to say, you know what? I really like this. And Marvel should do more of this. And they were able to say something more than what they usually do. But yeah, it's all good for me. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I agree. I really like this episode better than the first. The first episode, it really was just kind of setup of who the character is, who the villain is, and everything. And that's kind of like what I remember of the first episode, really. This one, though, what I like, there's definitely an arc going on with Steven I think. Yes. Yeah, that one. But also
Yeah, the other one's Mark.
Yeah, and then but also though, what I like about this one though is it seems like we're getting to the plot a lot faster than the other shows. That's the one thing with Hawkeye that every episode I think we just kept going like, yeah, this is fine, this is good, and it's like, I wonder where it's gonna go.
It was all character interactions, and that's kind of all you could say. And like, oh, I'm curious to see where this goes. But as far as the actual story, that one definitely took its time more than it really needed to.
Yeah,
and that's kind of what happens when you have the approach that every single show you do is not really a TV show more than it is a long movie.
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases like Hawkeye, you're going to see that a lot more, to where they're stretching out the story. I think you said one of the perfect examples was that scene. There was like a pretty memorable and long scene. Memorable because it went nowhere, involving the police and Haley Steinfeld's character, Kate Bishop.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. We made a joke about it. It's like, oh yeah, we had to get the cops off my back. I'm like, have they been bothering you at all since that one interaction? And so it's kind of ridiculous. But yeah, no, this one though, like I said, like we're getting to the plot a whole lot faster. We very much got the motivation of the villain. And we're just moving right along to like the next part of their plan, I guess. Not the villains, Mark's plan and everything.
Well, is he a villain? I mean, he ain't the villain of the series, but like, he's not, based on what we find out, he's not the best of people out there.
Mm-hmm. We also, I did like that new character we got, Layla. She seemed pretty interesting, and I'm very curious what she'll bring into the mix between Steven and Mark.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just so far this is already better paced than all the other shows, honestly. I mean, WandaVision's kind of different just because there was more of a mystery.
The format is different on that show.
So it's not really fair to compare it to that one. But either way, though, the pacing is already a lot better than the other shows. And I'm, like you said, too, what was it? Oscar Isaac, his performance, it's actually very, very good. I'll bring one scene up when we get to the spoilers of it. But yeah, so far, great episode. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. There's a lot more to say, but let's go ahead and get into the episode as it happened in sequence. We begin literally where we left off last week, or a little bit after the fact. Last week we ended off with this great shot of the Moon Knight suit finally being unveiled. And then this week we come back to what, seems to be like screams, and it was from Stephen Grant, who is in bed. And that means, oh no, this shit happened again. Although this time, he remembers. So much so, he gets up. He fucking basically like, oh, are you kidding me? Goes to the mirror and like basically is asking Mark to show himself like what happened. And at this point, all of us are wondering like, oh no, how bad did things get back there? He goes back to the museum. He encounters his acquaintance guard person that's there at the museum. He teases like, you know what, man, it's not going to be good, but what you will see is going to be some of the best shit you'll see in your whole life. They see it. It was actually kind of sad and confusing from the perspective of us, because it really made Steven look like a crazy person, because he was trembling and running away from nothing, at least on video camera. Which is kind of what we expected, considering how they were playing it up in that scene. And yeah, it's a mess. And there's this wonderful instance here where the video cameras show what looks like to be Steven walk away from the madness, but it ends up actually being Mark Spector. And you see it entirely in the acting. At least, because again, it is a wonderful, I think, combination of Oscar Isaac's performance as well as whoever the filmmakers are behind the scenes, that they're able to film that in a way. Again, episode 1 and episode 2, I'm not sure we mentioned this last week, wonderful uses of reflections to show in different scenes to see, because Mark really, we don't see much of him embody at all the body.
Mm-hmm.
Did I just say embody the body? Jesus. We don't see him actually take control. But we do see him basically in scenes where he and Steven are interacting, having a conversation. But he's always present, and you always have to look out for the reflection. So I have to say props on them for finding ways to make this look interesting. And actually, it works because of course it is a visual medium, and yay for that. But I think that's one of the moments where it's like, just a simple look. Oscar Isaac is able to, like, for us, we can distinguish who's Steven and who's Mark, right, David?
Yeah. As I mentioned, that's the scene I want to talk about. So when they're looking at the footage and everything, we see Mark. This is after his fight with the jackal in the bathroom and everything, and then I don't know where he's at in the museum, but he looks straight at the camera. And when Steve sees himself in the footage, you know, he's angry, like furious in a way, but so is Mark. And they both have just different expressions of rage going on between them, and it's like, dang, that's already like a huge difference between the two characters already. And so, I mean, I wish I can describe exactly how Steve's rage looks, but like Mark's, it's like, it's for sure murderous in the way.
Vicious, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
I mean, he basically just murdered. I mean,
he did
that jackal that was just there in the bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, I know we mentioned it last week, but also props to the production designers who that bathroom. Whoa. the look of that bathroom was great. All those mirrors and the color scheme. Too bad it was totaled completely.
Yeah.
So that was nice. So that's where we were at the beginning of it. At this point, we transitioned to Steven being comforted by some, I believe it was security or some rep from the museum people. At this point, it's inferred. It's even said in the scene that they had like given interviews or had interviews with some of like his coworkers. They've assessed what's happened. They've already made the decision to let him go. He knows this. At least to me, it came across to me that the people at the museum definitely chose not to press charges against Steven because by all indications, and again, this is just inferring, it's never said, but I think this is the intent. At least this is what it's inferred, that these people presume Steven to not be well to the point that perhaps mentally speaking, he could be a little bit ill. And that's why if you look at the footage, he's running away from something. He's very much in terror. He's sticking to the story that it's not me, it's somebody else. And so I would presume they chose not to press charges to save face and to not be, have a bad look in the public. Also, that maybe their own personal policy to not start litigation against people who are mentally ill. And then they even offer help. They hand him a pamphlet. And again, it's one of those examples of like why I like Steven so much in this show, being just a little bit of his quirks, in which he's basically handed a pamphlet to where they could basically, like, it's a home basically, right? Like for people who need help with this kind of issue. And even in that moment where he's, terrorized, there's another person inside of him. He just lost the job that he loves so much. The people, not really, but the job itself, you could see how passionate he was about it. He just lost it. And even as he's being handed a pamphlet of where he may be put away, he still is able to. And again, this is not, I think, an example of like in all the MCU projects where somebody like cracks a joke to diffuse the severity of the situation. It feels more like an organic line of like the quirkiness of who Steven actually is, to where it's like, oh, it looks quite posh, really. The actual facilities of it. And I think it kind of really speaks to why he's kind of likable. Like, in spite of all of the shitty things that just happened to him, he still finds a way to be positive, and I like that. And it also makes it a bit more sad too, because it's like, this is pretty bad.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mostly just felt sorry for him because his life is just going to shit and everything. And but yeah, I actually didn't think of it that much when I first saw it, that he's just still trying to be positive and everything. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's actually it's nice thinking about it now, I guess, that just kind of who he is as a character. Yeah.
Okay, at this point, it probably should be best to really introduce this layer of it. David, we've now spent these past 2 episodes, and I've thought a lot about this, and I can't be too sure. Is Stephen Grant a alter ego that was created through some kind of schism in his mind? And okay, at this point, I don't know if Mark Spector or if Stephen Grant are the original person that were like motoring this body, but Oscar Isaac, like, I don't know if this is like, if we're to believe that his mind was broken, he has some kind of like dual or split personality condition. I don't know who came first. It seems like, considering that there was a lot more life to Mark Spector, perhaps this happened, but I can't be too sure really what we're dealing with here, because there is a character in the form of Layla that comes back into the scene, who she believes to be Mark's life. And she doesn't seem to be aware of the fact that Steven's a thing, or at all that this was a person's wife, and that's why I'm just so lost as to like what's really happening. And we know at this point there are 3 beings that inhabit Oscar Isaac's body. That is Mark Spector, it is Stephen Grant, and that is the moon spirit Khonshu.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on here? Like, is this a person that really does suffer from this condition? And is this a new development? Or I don't know what the alternative would be.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's just a bunch of different theories that you can come up with. Mine, I think Mark just came about later. That's kind of, I think...
Mark or Steven?
Mark came about later.
Okay.
As to when, who knows, really. That's just a simple theory. I kind of would like to think, though, too, that maybe they've always been together. And...
They just didn't know of it?
They just need to know of it from each other or anything like that. The biggest thing is that's gonna like reveal everything is the mom. Steven calls his mom, but like we don't hear anything
right
on the other end. Real at all. And what it is that we see Steven always leaving a voicemail. And Steven gets postcards, I guess, from his mom. We saw that in the first episode, him posting one up. And someone made a theory that it's Mark the entire time. He's like he's either listening to the voicemails or something, and like sending back messages either through the postcards or some kind of email. I don't know how exactly, but he's also sending the postcards to Steven from his travels when he took over the body and all that. And so it's like, oh dang. So then. But it's still that's I don't think from that theory it still doesn't say who was first or anything like that.
Yeah,
but I don't know. I actually wouldn't mind if that's like something that we just never find out about. You know, it's like, hey, we're both here. We just got to figure this out.
Yeah,
like
I mean, sure.
Cool.
I mean, that could definitely be what happened. So at this point, we move on. A crushed Steven goes and visits his friend, the guy that's just like standing still in gold paint, tells him about what's happening in his life, and then gives him a hug, and then kind of like makes a declaration to like, all right, I need to figure this stuff out. Using the materials that he discovered last week in his apartment, or his flat, as the Brits say, he goes out to a storage facility, it seems, that is where the keys that he has belong to. The security guard recognizes him, even though, of course, Steven would not know of that. They take him to the storage facility, and it's a lot to take in what's actually in there. It's basically kind of like
just a place.
It's a whole different place, right? Definitely where Mark keeps the important stuff to keep away from Steven knowing about. A bag full of cash, another ID, which presumably is Mark Spector's ID, as well as the scarab, which finally confirms to Steven that all of this is 100% without a question real. At this point, Mark Spector reveals himself, and the two have what seems to be their first actual full conversation, which involves Mark trying to dump as much info on Steven as possible without breaking him. And again, from Steven's perspective, it is a bit ludicrous to think that a moon spirit by the name of Khonshu is why all of this is happening. Steven feels as if, that's it, I've lost it, and if you are real, fuck you, this is not right. If I am crazy, I'm gonna put myself out of the game, go to the police, and I hope they lock me up and they put as much pills as me as possible to make you go away. And again, pretty fucking dark, that he would be so willing to just go there. But again, if you take a step back, it's like, fuck, this is one of those moments where it's like, Steven's a good guy, man. Steven's a good guy. He's really just willing to just be locked up forever to keep an alter ego who he believes to be malevolent from doing more harm, or you know. And so this is, again, moments like these make me really like Steven. And what transpires next, he tries to run away, but then Khonshu reveals himself. I love the flickering of the lights in there as Khonshu comes closer and closer and closer to Steven, and a wonderful shot as Steven runs away, and then like he realizes that Khonshu is right behind him. And the light turns up and he sees Khonshu, and he's scary looking, and then he screams, but then the frame is frozen, but the sound keeps going. And then by the way, this, I don't know if you've seen, but on film Twitter right now, there has been a bit of a debate, because there's a debate about everything, it seems like, on film Twitter. But some Marvel people were like, what? Like, this is kind of weird. And it is, sure. And you can make the argument about whether or not it fits there. But for me, I like that moment because it is an example on the part of the people behind the series that they are making a concentrated effort to, I don't know, have some style with their show, to, you know, have their own little bit of a imprint on this, to, like, that it's as much theirs as it is Marvel. Like, it feels like for the first time in a long time, maybe since WandaVision actually, that the creators and writers are trying so desperately to, I don't know, make this just a little bit different. And I think, to me, it really fits in with the quirk of what Moon Knight is and who Steven is. And so, plus, I thought it was hilarious. So, I enjoyed that. So, I said a lot there. Go ahead and give your thoughts on what you like to say with that moment between Steven and Mark. And then, of course, that freeze frame.
I mean, I just like their interaction. Like I said, we're moving along in this plot now, so we're just getting on. I feel like they could have prolonged.
Real quick, man. It's funny you say that. And I agree with you. We're moving into the plot. And yet, I've heard from people. I've heard from some people. This episode was slow.
Like I said, we're getting all that info dump of Mark telling Steven.
There's a lot of information in this episode. A lot of information. And the episode feels like it's moving consistently. Like, I don't feel it's dragging at all. So that's
same. And then, yeah, I mean, it was just that. And then, so when Steve tries to leave, and then he sees Khonshu in the storage facility and all the lights flickering. I mean, it's fun too. I really like they keep playing up the fact that he's like this scary, malevolent being and all that. As to that freeze frame, I understand what you're saying. Like it works with Steven's character, the croaky fun of it. It's just, I don't know, it didn't work for me.
Sure.
But yeah.
Well, after this I love how bumbling he can be. Sometimes he just like accidentally stumbles into Layla, who shows up literally into the series, and whisks him away from presumed danger. And again, so much is happening here. You get the dynamic of who Layla was to Mark, and then Steven at the same time is finding out who she is, what this means. And Layla, to her, this is all an act. This is all him being undercover, and being like insistent to him to just drop the accent, stop it with this. I'm not buying this act. They go back to the flat, and then even more interesting happenings go on. While Layla is basically inspecting the stuff that we see there at the flat, and she realizes what's actually there, an interesting connection happens. It's pretty unexpected. Steven does not know who Layla is. Layla believes that Mark is, attempting to pull the wool over her by pretending to be somebody he's not. All the while, Layla finds, French poetry. She finds, the Egyptian alphabet and all the stuff that she herself is fascinated in. It seems like Mark never really was into any of that, but Steven is. And Steven immediately, weirdly, kind of like both of them realize they're kind of like bonding, and the sparks kind of fly in a weird way. And I think it speaks to the fact that there is definitely a history between the two of them that so far hasn't been revealed, because as much as it is a surprise to Steven that he has this much in common with, literally a stranger that just picked him up, she herself is surprised that somebody who supposedly she knows this well is actually interested and is learning the things that she's always liked. So I love how the way these two actors moved through that scene. Again, so much information being thrown at you, but you're not feeling like you're being like given that much information. So I like that so much. Then it gets to the scarab in the duffel bag, it seems like. And at this point, Steven's like, look, I know enough from you in just these few minutes that Mark must have been a dipshit to leave you. I would never do that because you seem really amazing. But I have to be honest with you, I'm not Mark. And in fact, I want to take this scarab out of the bag and I want to show you to prove all of what's going on. And at this point, Mark speaks to Steven to not do that because he doesn't want to get Layla killed. And again, yet another example of the good-hearted individual Steven is. Because even though it's obviously important for him that people around him know who they're talking to, because it's not, it cannot be a good thing to constantly be referred by a different name or by a different identity that is not yourself. That could also be perceived, by the way, as an allegory for a lot of people in our own world who have to deal with that on a day-to-day basis. Although that's not really the intent in this here, but it could be perceived that way. In this case, he stops himself from doing it to keep Layla from, put her out of harm's way. She pushes him out of the way. She realizes what it is. And she again reveals more information in that this scarab was something that she and Mark had been looking for years to find. And she feels as if this whole persona of Steven was invented by Mark to further push her away. A lot of inner dynamics that are happening here, and Layla is just so fucking confused at this point. And then they get a knock on the door. The cops walk in. But are they cops? We'll get to that in a bit. First of all, your thoughts on this whole interaction?
Yeah, I really liked the interaction. It was just kind of... I really liked the info on top of getting to know more of what Mark's past is like and what the heck has he been doing the whole time. And everything. But I also really like Steven and Layla's connection, their love, I guess, of Egyptian history, or just really all of Egypt, I guess. And it's kind of nice seeing Steve just kind of bonding with someone, even though she's like still, I mean, obviously she's frustrated and confused about the whole situation, but like, there's, you can still tell that there's like already a bond happening in that moment and everything.
You know what? Scratch that, David. It's actually nice to see Steven talk to somebody who treats him nicely. And actually have a good, genuine moment. Because again, these past 2 episodes have basically been non-stop, like, harassment almost, it seems like, or abuse, shall we say, for, well, not abuse, but they've been relatively rude and mean to him. Mm-hmm. And you know what? Before we move on, there was an aspect of this I forgot to mention. And it's not something that you and I thought of clearly because it wasn't at all brought up in our breakdown last week. But it's come to light that Oscar Isaac has played this character, Stephen Grant, with the intention of a character who is on the spectrum. Again, we should all be aware of the fact that April is Autism Awareness Month. There are many people all over the world who are on the spectrum of that particular mental issue or any other, as they say. And by the way, that's not at all to say that that can cripple you. Of course, there's a lot of information out there for those who want to know more of it, and please go and seek that out. Because definitely we see that Stephen Grant is a fully functional person. But why it's brought up here is perhaps the reason for his quirkiness and perhaps the reason for why it seems that he has so many awkward social interactions perhaps could stem from the fact that Oscar Isaac is playing this character, and this character, in fact, is intended to be somebody who is on the spectrum. That is a nice touch that I didn't notice, and I actually kind of appreciated it more for it, actually. What do you think about that?
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I really like that little detail that he tried to put in. And when you point it out, it is, you can see...
you see it.
Yeah, you see it in the performance, too, and I kind of like that.
Yeah, it all falls into place a little bit, and kind of like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I see it now a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
As you were saying.
Yeah, and then when I noticed that Layla and Steven have a lot in common, that part of me thinks like they were probably, that made me theorize even more that Mark and Steven have been together this whole time, like their whole entire lives. Because I would like to think that Mark liked Layla because she had a lot in common with Steven, and maybe a part of him just kind of like, this is his way of connecting with Steven in a way, or trying to do something with that. And so, yeah, that's why I kind of find it nice, Layla being around Steven. And
a little bit of added information. We didn't touch on this in the previous scene with Mark and with Steven, but Mark basically tells Steven the arrangement of his deal with Conchu, one of the aspects of which happened to be that Conchu insisted on Mark that Steven would not be in the way. Later on in this episode, in an interaction with Ethan Hawke, we're led to believe that Conchu really liked the idea of going to Mark Spector because he was he had a broken mind. So I think perhaps if we're going to use context clues, I think it seems to suggest perhaps that this issue with Steven and Mark being a split personality was a thing before Conchu even walked into the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because it also, I mean, Conchu found, from, again, context clues and what's implied. Conchu at the end of the episode says that, you were a corpse when I found you. I own this body. So, yeah, I think there's a lot there, David, that suggests you're correct, that this dual personality has kind of existed the entire time that they've been alive, which is interesting. There were other theories out there that I've heard that perhaps, like, throughout the years, this is something that happened to Mark Spector, that he gained a dual personality. I don't know if that, medically speaking, can happen, but let's just say this theory goes with it, and that Stephen Grant was created out of the things that Mark wanted to be and do for Layla but couldn't. So perhaps that's why, Steven and Layla have so much in common. At least what we find out. So there is all of that. Anything else on this moment?
No.
Okay, so at this point, these, we'll call them quote unquote policemen, are, looking at the apartment. They're pretty suspicious, I would say. They act in a manner that is not normal, and it looks like they're going out of their way to look for things to basically book them, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
Layla at this point sneaks out with the scarab. They may actually be looking for the scarab, as a matter of fact, now that I'm thinking about it. Because it ends up, being revealed that they work for Ethan Hawke and belong to this cult of Amit. And then they take him in. They take him in because they find some excuse. I guess this is stolen paperweight. We'll take that. And then they also find the passport from Mark Spector. Okay, all that happens. In the car ride along the way, they basically run a Google search on who Mark Spector was. And you get the impression, obviously, there's more to be revealed for what happens. But what we do know is this person, Mark Spector, was a mercenary, which means he killed people for a living, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the killings that was mentioned here was that of, I believe it was an archaeological site, and these were just ordinary people who they were, killed execution style with their hands behind their heads. Pretty dark stuff to know about this character. And you said that in this moment, Mark Spector is talking to Steven to tell him that that's not what it seems like, that's not all that there is.
Yeah.
And they leave him alone in the car. And all of this is because Ethan Hawke, they bugged the car. He wanted to see what's really, this person's deal. He hears them talking, the two talking to each other. He hears Steven talk to somebody else who's not in the car. Mm-hmm. And at that point, he kind of puts all the pieces together. He lets him out. And then he basically understands that this is a being that, or a vessel that has three particular personalities involved, which is Mark, Steven, and Khonshu. Mm. And it's revealed that Ethan Hawke used to be the Avatar, or Khonshu's avatar.
Yeah.
But left it. And at this point, it's like there are some pretty interesting similarities between how Khonshu and whoever his avatar work, and Ghost Rider, and the Spirit of Vengeance, and the characters Johnny Blaze, or what's the other one? Robbie Reyes. Mm. And as we go through the cult, I don't know if it's a headquarters, it's just a community of some sort, but they're all there. He drops information about who Khonshu is and how he's ineffectual, and this whole idea of, Khonshu's punishment comes after the crime, and that's not good enough, and that his god, Amit, is going to put an end to all of that, and that everybody's going to be judged at once for what they do or will do, and that's going to be the matter of it. In this sequence, they eat lentil soup, which evidently on Twitter, if you saw, they released the recipe for that soup. So if you want to eat that, because they're both vegan and they enjoy that. Again, I love that in all of this, Steven finds time to say, this is really good soup, which it definitely seemed like. But they get into a bit of a debate, right? Of what, we see the ideology that Ethan Hawke subscribes to. But again, even in this moment, we see that Steven kind of pulls away from this with that doesn't seem kind of right or fair. And are you really going to kill babies? Would you really kill a baby if Amit said this would all happen because of them one day? Mm-hmm. And the whole thing kind of really falls apart. And at that point, Ethan Hawke just kind of gives up and then demands for the scarab. To which Layla walks in, has the scarab, and then shenanigans ensue. So that's what happens there. Any thoughts on all of that? I kind of sped through it, but that's kind of basically what happens there.
No, yeah. I mean, so when the cops show up and everything, yeah, it's already suspicious just because they're really trying to look for something against him and everything, and they just, I don't know, if they're being very forceful towards him and everything instead of like the usual that you see in cops of, you know, hey, how you doing and all that. It's like, no, it's like, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? Not how are you doing? And then one thing I didn't notice the first time I saw it on the video, but there was this weird time skip, I guess, that happened where in the beginning of the episode, he's clearly going to work. It's probably the morning, maybe close to the afternoon, but chances are it's the morning. And then when the cops come in, it's still daylight. And then when they take him out of his apartment, like we're assuming that they're taking him to the police station or something, it's already nighttime by the time we get to the car. And it's like, how long have they been driving? Like how much time had passed since like he went to his apartment and the cops were there and all that. It was a weird time skip. Later on we see that it's probably because of the CGI. It's making CGI creatures or whatever animals, whatever you need to do at night. It's easier to do, makes it look better than in daylight. So that's probably the reason why. And so when he gets there, I really like the interaction between him and the villain. Just because you can clearly see like he's probably like 10 steps ahead of Steven and everything. Probably even Mark too. Who knows? And I really like the information dump of him being a past avatar. And he just knows how
he was the avatar.
He was the avatar and how Khonshu thinks and everything. Like I love those moments where he's just like, oh, is he saying this now? Is he saying this? And then did you see this gust of wind blowing? And he's just like, that's all you can do, really. There's nothing much you can do, so don't worry about him. And so I really like that. It really makes him like a formidable villain, I guess. Even though like he walks around in the cane and everything, he looks probably a lot older than Steven and all that. So like he's not really formidable in the strength wise, I guess. But I don't know. I really like his. I really like this interaction between the two. Yeah,
the way he carries himself is pretty. I mean, you feel the weight.
Yeah. And then, and one thing I noticed throughout the episode though is this is what I mentioned that I really like seeing Steve's character arc in this. It's not much of an arc in this episode, but what I'm liking though is that he is progressively getting braver and braver throughout this episode. You know, he when they were in the storage facility and he's talking to Mark, you know, he's basically telling him like, hey, I'm gaining control of this whole situation and everything, instead of being afraid. And then when he's face to face with the villain and all that, and he's telling him his plan about this whole raising Ahmet to stop crime before it happens. Again, he could have easily just been like, oh, okay, cool, I guess. Yeah, you do that, and he could have walked away. But no, he's like actually trying to face him down. He's trying to tell him like, you're wrong. Like, this is so wrong in so many levels, dude. And you know it. And so that's one reason why I really like that scene too. Because again, he's slowly getting braver and braver. And then, yeah, Layla shows up and madness.
The multiverse of madness? No. Yeah, Layla shows up. She's got the scarab, which she uses as a diversion to slowly get near Steven. Then they begin to run away, at which point Ethan Hawke uses the cane to unleash the power of Ahmet, which seems like manifests yet another jackal. While they're in an enclosed space, Layla and Steven are arguing about what to do next. How do they get out of here? Layla seems to know the answer, and she tells Steven, who she still thinks is Mark or whatever, to just reveal the suit, summon the suit, summon the suit, summon the suit. Of course, he's got no idea what that means or what to do. He's slowly just breaking down, just at a complete loss. to which Layla lends a helping hand and recognizes him for who he is, and that is Steven, which gets his attention. Finally, for the first time this episode, he feels seen and heard, and he starts to maybe think he can put this shit together, to which the jackal opens up. They walk out. No, they don't walk out. They think he jumps out, and the suit is summoned, and it's not the one we saw last week. It is a completely different one. He has a great, probably the best superhero landing, to where he, of course, they slam the knees on the floor, and then he just collapses almost immediately, which is perhaps the most believable they've been in all of these movies. Let's be real about that. And the suit is, well, to Mark's, persuasion, a bit ridiculous. Sure, it is a bit ridiculous, but you know what? I like how it looks. I really do. Mr. Knight, at least that's the persona in which, or the costume from what it is. And clearly, from what people on the internet have told me, it is not exactly how it is in the comics, which I don't give two shits about at all, because what I saw was pretty damn entertaining. I thought it was entirely pretty organic with like who Stephen Grant is in this show. It felt right. It felt right that he, this suit gave him powers that he doesn't know how to maneuver, but he's finding his way, bumbling his way as he should, because he's all new to this. And then, trying to pep himself up and, pull himself together through all of it. I forget what the line was about sting like a bee or whatever. My name's Steven with a B. No, with a V. Which I thought was kind of the line of the episode. It was pretty good. I enjoyed it. I understand to an extent why people would be disappointed with like what this version of Mr. Knight would be. But at the same time, it seems as if the hate, as per usual, has gotten a bit blown out of proportion. I don't know your take on all of this.
Yeah. So I going back a bit, I really liked Layla and Steven's interaction right before he gets the suit and everything. My one little thing is that I feel like Steven should have been, I don't know the right word, but I guess he should have been a bit more intense about it, because she's calling him Mark, and Mark breaking the suit out and all that and everything. And I feel like in that moment he should have like kind of screamed it out, like, I'm Steven, goddammit, and everything. I don't know, just because that's kind of been the whole thing about him this whole time, is that Mark wants to come out. It's like, Mark, let me take over. And everyone's telling him to take over. It's like, no, this is my body. This is my fucking life. I'm Steven and all that. So that's just one little, I wouldn't say nitpick, just like one little change I would want to make.
If your hands are on the driver's seat, that's what you would do.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But then when he gets a suit, I really actually like his costume too. It's fancy. But yeah, I mean, the whole sequence it's just really funny. It fits as his character, and I really like this character. And like you said, I understand why some people would be frustrated that this isn't the character in the comics and all that, but I haven't read the comics, so I don't really care. Even if I did, I probably wouldn't. I mean, who knows? We'll just have to wait on that. I usually don't get hung up on adaptations if it's not completely accurate. I really don't mind that. So, yeah. But that whole sequence though, it's just so funny. He's just hilarious the entire time, because I feel like this is the moment though, like where now even though he's scared as shit fighting the jackal, like this is probably the most confident that he's ever felt, because he knows he has super strength. He's got these powers now and everything. So I don't know.
And in his fairness, he is able to hold his own for a bit. But here's the thing about this is, a lot of people were also upset. Like, Mr. Knight apparently in the comics is supposed to be this badass, and in the comics he would have wiped the floor with that jackal, and people were upset. And I would counter that with like, well, I'm sorry, but this is where you have to detach yourself from the comics, because this Stephen Grant does not know how to fight. Mm-hmm. How unrealistic would it be if he would have completely just wiped the floor with that jackal?
Yeah.
I'm not sure anybody would buy that. And what we did see transpire is exactly what would happen to Stephen Grant, like, using the powers for the first time.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, is that we're still in the very, very beginnings of his hero story. So who knows, season 3 later on, I could definitely see an episode, the first episode of another season starting off, and he's just like kicking ass everywhere, Steven specifically, so I don't know. I think it's fine for now.
Right, and Mark is finally able to convince him to take control of the body. The Moon Knight's proper suit actually comes back and then leads the jackal away from the people. And then we have a pretty good collection of wonderful shots of Moon Knight running across the cityscape with the moon in the background. Also another one where I believe they go by a reflection pool, and we see the show loves reflections. We actually see the reflection of the moon. And then, of course, the jackal is dispensed with pretty quickly. And what happens next is an interaction with Steven and Mark. And Steven's like, I don't like this feeling, give me my body back. And Mark's like, no, I have things to do. No, that's not going to happen. He breaks the glass, just fed up with Steven. Khonshu reveals himself. And a couple of things are revealed here. Mark wants to be done with Khonshu. He wants nothing to do with him, but he is concerned about what Khonshu would replace him with. And Khonshu basically says, well, hey, you want to get rid of me? Sure, fine, but you're not going to like who I pick next. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens, what Mark is going to do, because he pretty much has like what Coulson would say, his balls caught in a vice. It doesn't seem, doesn't know. I mean, I don't know how he finds a way out of this.
Yeah.
And then the episode ends with Ethan Hawke finding the scarab. And that's that. Oh, and then they are in Egypt.
Yeah, they're in Egypt. Yeah. One thing I haven't mentioned, but we're finding out all this information about Mark, that he's a mercenary. He doesn't. Seems like he doesn't really care about Steven, but who knows? I feel like we're going to get more information on that later on. But I do really like the fact that he does actually care about Layla and everything, that there is a protective side of him. And even though he goes about it debatably in the wrong way, he is pretty heroic in a sense. But yeah, that chase scene though of the jackal and Moon Knight, that's a really nice scene. Again, they did it at night just because they can make it look nicer. And I really like the approach of it, is that he took, I remember when he was trying to convince Steven to take over the body, in the first episode he was just like, hey, let me take over so we can save your life, and then now that Steven, like, he really doesn't want Mark to control more and more. I like the way he tried to debate him about it. It was just like, hey, there's innocent people here, you don't know what you're doing, let me take over. And so I'm kind of curious later on if, like, they'll keep going back and forward on that, like, I would like to think that, there's 10 monsters around and there's innocent people around. So, like, should it be Mark taking over because he can just handle it easily, or should it be Steven? So he can just, all he can focus on is just trying to get the people away or something like that. I don't know. I think it'd be cool if throughout the season they keep debating whether who should take over or not. But yeah, and then he does that. Chase sequence looks nice. And then at the end of this, I really like Khonshu. He's a bit of an asshole, but I don't know. There's just something about him that kind of, like, it's entertaining when he's around.
He's an entertaining asshole. That's definitely true there. Like, even the last line of the episode is, "Where the hell do you think we're going?"
Yeah, and then we're in Egypt.
Yeah, I mean, learning more about that mythology is going to be pretty interesting, because I think Ethan Hawke's conversation with Steven, apparently this god was I don't know, was he banished? But he definitely said that he's not respected by the other gods.
Mm-hmm.
I guess he means the other Egyptian gods?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not sure what else that would mean.
Mm-hmm. I am reading a book about these kids who are like related to the pharaohs, past pharaohs of Egypt and all that, and so like there's a lot of Egyptian mythology going on in that. So I'm learning. It's just kind of cool, like seeing this show, and then I'm learning stuff about Egyptian mythology from the book. And there's even like a similarity to them in that the main characters are kind of like hosts for Egyptian gods and everything. And so yeah, it's just, I don't know, that's just something random I wanted to bring up.
Absolutely. And then, yeah, I mean, that's basically it. I'm not sure where this is going next, but so far I'm really enjoying this. And I'm at the point now where I'm definitely looking forward to what they do next. Is there anything else we can say about Moon Knight this week?
No, I don't think so.
All right, then. Well, if that's the case, I want to thank all of you for tuning in and listening to our show. It's been real, as the kids have said. Stay under our spotlight because we've got a lot of more wonderful content coming your way. Soon, we're going to have a review for the film Everything Everywhere All at Once. And then, also, in the very near future, we are going to have our top 10 movies of the year 2021. And David, if you happen to have a list ready, that way we can just read it off on the air. If you wanted to form a list of some sort of what your favorite 10 films of the year were. Mm-hmm. All right, so without any further ado, you can catch our podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts every single Sunday. And until next time, we'll see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.